So some of the greatest Delta blues artists that you should hear, we're going to name a few people here. Delta blues from western Mississippi, of course, one of the oldest genres of blues there is. It predates the first recordings of it probably by about 20 years. And it's what most people think of when they think of old acoustic blues. It's raw, it's emotional, and it's incredibly important for modern music. The short list I'm going to give you here is going to leave a lot of people out, but these are artists you should hear before you die, regardless of your level of involvement with blues music. I intentionally didn't include people who made their careers after they moved away from the Delta and went to places like Chicago and Detroit. People like Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, John Lee Hooker. Everybody on this list are artists whose main body of work was done while they were based in the Delta as acoustic artists. And in no particular order, the first person on this list is Son House, born 1902 near Clarksdale, Mississippi. He grew up in a musical family. His father was a preacher and an alcoholic, and Son was a chip off the old block. He was also a preacher and an alcoholic.
Tell me who's that writing? John the Revelator wrote the book of the seven seals.
During his early life, he rejected blues music on religious grounds. He worked as a pastor, and of course, back in those days, blues was considered to be of the devil. His preaching career didn't last too long. He started drinking just like the old man and was forced out of it. One day he saw a friend of his playing slide guitar for the first time, and his attitude towards blues music changed immediately. He went out and got a guitar of his own, and pretty soon he was playing juke joints. He became an associate of Charlie Patton, the big fish in the pond at that time, and of Willie Brown, and it was through Charlie Patton that he got to record for Paramount Records in 1930. They didn't sell very well, and those were the only recordings he made for a record company up until he was rediscovered in the 1960s. He did make some recordings for Alan Lomax and the Library of Congress in the early 40s, but he didn't have much to do with music after that. He ended up in Rochester, New York, working as a train porter. That's basically a guy who carries people's bags and basically acts as the train version of a flight attendant. And that's where they found him in the 60s. He had pretty much forgotten how to play guitar, and Alan Wilson from Canned Heat had to show him how to play his own stuff again. But once he got going, he toured all around America and in Europe and made some recordings for CBS.
Well, I'm gonna be straight with you, baby. I'm gonna wait to put you down.
His rediscovery career lasted about 10 years, and he was forced to retire for health reasons, and he died of cancer in 1988. If you listen to the old Paramount recordings, you can hear the original version of Walkin' Blues, which is a standard in blues music. You can also hear My Black Mama, which features the famous Son House lick. The Lomax recordings are really interesting. They were recorded in a store. That was apparently the only place they could get good power to run the equipment. And in some spots, you can actually hear a train going by, and that wasn't for effect. There was actually a train going by. Of course, on the Rediscovery records, you get the benefit of modern recording, and that's when he did Death Letter Blues, which is a signature piece for him nowadays. My second choice is going to be Charlie Patton, born maybe possibly 1891 and lived in Sunflower County, Mississippi. He spent a lot of time on Dockery Farms. His family moved there when he was a kid. And of course, Dockery Farms is pretty central to Delta blues music. It's on the Mississippi Blues Trail, and you can still see it today. It was at Dockery that he met a guy named Henry Sloan, who taught him how to play something called blues music. This probably would have been in the 19-aughts and the 19-teens. So pretty early in the history of this music. Charlie Patton is often called the father of the Delta Blues, but that title might belong to Henry Sloan, but he was never recorded. Unlike most other Delta Blues artists of the time, Charlie Patton was pretty successful. He sold records all over the country, and he was in demand for live performances. He made more money than any other pre-war Delta artist, and more money than the average laborer in rural Mississippi. Anyone who could name a Delta Blues artist at that time would probably not know the name of Robert Johnson, but would know the name of Charlie Patton. He was a small guy with a big gravelly voice that could project over long distances, and that's something that his student Howlin' Wolf apparently took note of. He was known for his showmanship. He would do tricks with the guitar like throwing it up in the air and playing it in weird positions. It's really a shame there's no film of him. He made his first recordings in 1929 and recorded up through 1934 when he died. Most of his recordings were for Paramount, but he made some for Vocalion. Because his records sold well, he got to make a lot of them. He made around 70 recordings, which is about the same as all the other artists on this list combined as far as their pre-war commercial stuff. He has this very raw, gritty sound. It's hard to understand what he's singing sometimes, but it's almost like the boiled down essence of what the Delta must have been like 100 years ago. You can hear proto-blues in his music, influence that predates the time of his recordings probably by decades. Pony Blues is one of his signature pieces and a classic of Delta blues. Spoonful of Blues is really great, and it also inspired Spoonful by Willie Dixon later on. And High Water Everywhere is another one you should check out. It's a two-part song that takes up both sides of a '78 record, and it was written about the same big flood in Mississippi that When the Levee Breaks was written about. Next on this list is the guy who needs no introduction, Robert Johnson. If Charlie Patton was the most well-known Delta blues singer of the 1930s, then Robert Johnson is the most well-known today. He was born in Hazelhurst, Mississippi in 1911, which makes him the youngest person on this list. We've all heard the story. He wasn't very good on guitar. He disappeared for a while, then he resurfaced, and all of a sudden he was really great. And the legend is that he went down to the crossroads and sold his soul to the devil for guitar talent. So it's a retread of Dr. Faust. But in reality, he went to stay with a blues musician named Ike Zimmerman, who was never recorded. But he must have been pretty damn good because he turned Robert Johnson into one of the best guitar players in the Delta blues genre. Not only that, he was one of the greatest songwriters in all of blues music. His lyrics can be very poetic and full of imagery.
I'm the man that rode when icicles hanging on the tree.
Standards like Sweet Home Chicago, Dust My Broom, Love in Vain, you've probably heard all sorts of people cover. He borrowed from artists like Son House and Skip James and Kokomo Arnold, but he added his own special touch to the music that made the material all his own. In 1936 and 37, he recorded 29 songs that were mostly released on Vocalion, but also some other labels that were owned by the same company. Terraplane Blues did okay regionally, and that became his signature song when he was alive, but the records didn't sell very well. He was never really known very well. He died in 1938 after being poisoned by the guy he was cucking, and then he faded into obscurity. His memory was carried on by musicians who knew him or were influenced by him, like Elmore James and Muddy Waters, but most people in the 40s and 50s would have no idea about a blues musician named Robert Johnson. That all changed in the 60s when his music was re-released and it fell into the hands of some really important rock musicians. People like Cream and the Rolling Stones were covering his material, and that was the beginning of him becoming the most famous Delta bluesman. In a weird kind of way, he's a classic rock artist because he's more associated with rock music than any other pre-war musician. As far as what to check out by him, almost all of his songs are classics, but a few of my favorites are Crossroad Blues, Steady Rollin' Man, and Ramblin' on My Mind. Before we go any further, you can support what I'm doing here by checking out my Patreon. There's exclusive content on there, there's early access to videos, and there are MP3 downloads of my recordings. That's linked below. Next we have Mississippi John Hurt. John Hurt is Delta blues more by way of geography than by sound. A lot of people put him more on the folk side of things, but he's just too nice of a guy to leave off this list. He was born in 1893 and raised in Avalon, Mississippi. He started playing guitar at the age of 9 and developed a syncopated finger-picking style that's kind of reminiscent of Piedmont blues.
To learn to play guitar, I had no teacher. Got to walk the Red Valley for yourself. My mother had to walk that.
Unlike the other guys on this list, he stayed close to home and never became an itinerant performer. He did farm work for most of his life. He did a couple of recording sessions and sales were okay, but not good enough for OK Records to offer him more recording sessions. So after that, he gave up on the notion of a professional music career, and he was mostly just known around Avalon locally. He would play at events around town. That was until 1963 when musicologists decided to track him down. He had a song called Avalon Blues, so a guy went to Avalon looking for him and found him there. I believe he was the first of the old Delta guys to be rediscovered. They convinced him to move to Washington, D.C., and he started doing shows, touring, recording, and he did that until he died of a heart attack in 1966. The music has a calmness about it, even when he's playing the shit out of the guitar. The vocals have this very soft, almost spoken kind of sound.
But cruel Staggerly, that bad man, oh cruel Staggerly.
If If you're a fan of old-time music, you're a fan of folk music, you're a fan of early country, he's a really good one to check out. There's this episode of Pete Seeger's show Rainbow Quest where he was a guest, and you can find that on YouTube. His version of Stack-a-Lee I consider the greatest out there. Avalon Blues is a signature piece by him, and if you want to hear some really awesome guitar playing, check out Candyman Blues. And last but not least is Skip James, born 1902 in Bentonia, Mississippi. He spent his early years making money as a moonshiner, a pimp, and probably worst of all, a music teacher. He taught violin, piano, and of course guitar. He developed a totally unique sound that involved finger picking with an open D minor tuning, and that came to define a sub-genre of blues called the Bentonia School. He was recommended to Paramount Records by H.C. Spears, the same guy who brought you Robert Johnson and Charlie Patton, and he sat for a session in 1931. The records didn't sell well, and soon after he took up religion and did various manual labor jobs for the next 30 years. He was rediscovered in 1964 and restarted his performing and recording career. His guitar playing was still intact despite having stepped away from blues music for so long, and he played for the next 5 years until 1969 when he died of cancer. Skip James's music is eerie. The minor tuning along with the falsetto singing, it can be really chilling to listen to.
Now if I can ever get up off of this old hard time floor, people I'll never get out.
It sounds Delta as fuck, but it's totally different from anyone else, except for the people he directly influenced. If you like Hellhound on My Trail, that's Robert Johnson being Skip James. Some songs you should check out by him, you've got I'm So Glad, which is a fast finger-picking masterpiece that Cream later covered. Devil Got My Woman's an absolute classic by him, and Hard Time Killing Floor is probably the ultimate embodiment of his sound. It was written right when the Great Depression was kicking off, and that's what it's about. I also love his version of Crow Jane a lot, which you can find on YouTube. And there you go, that's a list of pre-war Delta blues musicians that you really ought to give a listen. And I'd love to hear about your favorite Delta artists in the comments and people you thought should have been included on this list. And if you enjoy what I'm doing here, please like, subscribe, and share. It helps me in the YouTube algorithm, and it doesn't cost you nothing. And also check out my live stream I do every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Meet you on the next one, and don't be late.